that introduction, Eric, and thank you for having me uh, do this presentation today on building wealth through real estate, investing in properties, and I think that it's going to be very informative and impactful. Some ways you will anticipate, some ways you probably have not. Because I have a ton of information to get through and a significant amount of questions that I'm trying to cover, uh, I am going to go through this relatively fast. However, if you have any questions, my contact information, well, one, you will be able to ask some questions at the end of the presentation. And I'm trying to hope to have some minutes carved out for that. But then also you can follow up with me later on if you have any deeper dives that you want to do specific to your situation. So, with that being said, learn a little bit about myself. So, I've been in real estate for 21 years. I have serviced literally hundreds of almost thousands of people in real estate, being servicing them and helping them buy for their own personal use, investment, and I have done some commercial transactions as well. In addition to owning my real estate firm, I have also owned and operated a construction company in the past for 6 years, and where we did residential and commercial construction. Um, I also have some experience in corporate financial planning. I used to be a financial planner years ago, so I used to wear, if you're old school, American Express Financial Advisors hat, now known as Ameriprise. That being said, I also have worked for some nonprofits, one of them in which I bought, fixed, and sold residential property. I managed their first-time homebuyer classes and their pre-purchase counseling programs as well. I've also trained realtors, housing advisors, in addition to general public on variety of real estate topics. And so this is a familiar space for me. One thing that is a little unique to myself is that I have done some first person of color, first real African American, in a few different categories. One is that served 3 terms on the Minneapolis area Realtors Board of Directors. I currently am serving as their treasurer, which is a first for person of color or African American descent. And that's important because I am in charge of the finances for a multi-million-dollar organization and the first one of color in its 134-year history. I've also sat on the local, state, and national association of Realtors Board of Directors. I'm the first person of color to sit on all 3 at one time. I am also the first person of color to be appointed and elected to represent Minnesota on a national stage. So I've had some wonderful exposure to real estate on a level that most don't get a chance to see. So I'm very happy that I'm able to have this conversation with you and getting you to understand a little bit more about how real estate impacts the Pan-African or the person of African descent. And so let's talk about what's in it for you today's discussion. We're going to be talking about what's in it for you. We're going to go over commercial versus residential, just to give you a little bit of a taste and understanding on that. Residential investment focus, so you can have a better idea. I'm seeing a good friend of mine. Some of you, oops, sorry, that's where I get a little click happy. Some of you I may know, some of you, and if I do know you, I appreciate you listening to me. And those of you that don't know me, would love to get to know you, and hopefully we'll build a stronger community. You'll understand what I mean by that a little bit later. We're going to talk about not only the focusing on residential, but we're going to also talk about what it takes to obtain a property. How do you know you're ready to embark on this kind of a mission? Some investment tips, and then an investment resources. Apparently, my slide, we made some changes to it, but they didn't cross over yet. So it is what it is. All right, but there's some investment resources, and then how I can help. So let's go ahead and go to the next one. Value of property investment. What's in it for you? So why do buyers purchase investment property? Well, the big thing is that it produces cash. It helps with creating capital. But that is, you want to monitor what is called your cash flow. Now, cash flow is money that you receive above and above, long story short, above and beyond all your obligations. And so if you are, when you think of maintenance and debt obligations and all the activities or costs that goes into the maintenance of a property or keeping that property, let's say that comes out to $2,500. If you are collecting, and let's say it's a duplex, because I've had a significant amount of individuals ask me about duplexes, then the best scenario is to have a unit that can cover majority, at least the mortgage. If not, it won't cover all the costs, but at least if it can cover the mortgage. So if you're $2,500 total cost involved, then if it was $1,800 on the mortgage payment, then you would like to have a situation where you can get a one side to be close to $1,800 as much as possible. But let's say you get a unit and there's 3-bedroom, 1 bath on both sides, each side, they're identical. So you can get $1,500 for one and $1,500 for the other. You are now collecting $3,000 in the total revenue. So if you minus the 3,000, 2,500 from the 3,000, you're basically cash flowing $500 to the good a month. That is something that you want to pay attention to when you're talking about one, investing and buying and holding. But even when you're talking about fixing and flipping, your main goal is to have more cash at the end than you started with. So you want to make sure that you do well there. There's a significant amount of tax benefits. To be honest with you, I can hold a whole nother class on tax benefits, but do understand that it is encouraged to own property, especially from an investor standpoint. Our last president made it so that actually there was some more incentives to own property from a tax basis as well, which leads to building your assets. You know, some of my friends, we have a conversation about if you should build assets or if you should always sell once you have a good price that you can get. And I'm of the mindset, the more assets, the merrier. Now, the under part about that, however, is that the more assets, the more responsibility. So you have to understand the balance. You're going to be your own person. You're going to have your own pain level. You're going to have your own idea of what you can and cannot do. But there are certain things that everyone can do if they are aware of the knowledge and resources that are out there. And that's where partnering with someone that is knowledgeable in that space is to your advantage. Now, in obtaining assets and building out your portfolio, it helps create capital because, again, if you have 5 properties that are doing that first scenario that I just mentioned, you now have, instead of $500 a month, plus cash flow. You have, if they're all identical, 2,500 a month in cash flow. So that's why duplication and building your assets is something that is attractive to most people. So you got to understand again, but you have to manage all that, and that comes with some work. Now, as Eric mentioned earlier, I am passionate about building community as well, because the more assets that you have, the more that you are going to be a contributing person and a constituent of a particular community and or neighborhood. And this is where I have the pleasure of having a little bit that I can divert off of the normal real estate investment conversation, is that I'm speaking to a group of individuals that um, are, one, I see is aware of who they are. They know what community they are a part of. But then in addition to that, I believe that you have a unique perspective, that you have a bit more capacity than the average individual when you talk about per capita on this particular Zoom meeting. So what does that, how does that help, or what does that mean? That means that if you understand your Black dollar, your Pan-African dollar, and you start to utilize it in a way that can benefit people. As, for example, one of the organizations that I mentioned earlier where I said that I bought, fixed up, and sold houses was Model Cities. Model Cities is an organization that is been led by a person, an African American, actually woman, for the last 30 something years. The woman before the lady running it now was in it for 25 plus years. And the lady is now is a good friend of mine as well. We used to be co-workers. And so that is an individual that understands the continuity of the Black dollar. So what's that? Well, so we at one of my projects that I worked on was a foreclosure that was in a Black neighborhood, considered a Black neighborhood in St. Paul, and where we hired, so we were the owner. My boss, the director of real estate, was also an African American lady. I was a project manager that handled the whole transaction. We hired a general contractor who was African American. We hired an architect that was African American. We hired the end user was African American. The loan officer was African American. I mean, from top to bottom, there was nothing but us as representation. So we were able to really stretch out the impact of that particular project. It's one of my feathers in my hat, one of my most things that I'm most proud of. And if you start to approach a project like that, when that was, again, a property within a Black community. So that not only raised the value of that particular community in that area, but it also fed, as you can see, several different individuals along the way. So that's where we have an opportunity ahead of us. If you were here earlier in the very beginning of the Zoom call, you may have heard me say that we are in a rare position where we can have an extraordinary impact on our community. And I also will divert a little bit, but it's still relative, because Eric and I had a conversation a little bit earlier, and I said, you know, out of the professionals that you have had the wonderful pleasure of bringing forth to this group, I'm a little bit different in the element that I come from a family of community activists. My mother was a strong community activist, and my father was from Ghana, West Africa, and you couldn't tell that man nothing about not being African. So I'm very proud of those contributions to my history. And so one of the things that I said that you were going to be surprised about is that there is a strong relationship between the health of our community overall and our ownership rates of real estate. If you pay attention, we are, as a community, African Americans, we only want, for the rough numbers, 1 out of 4 African Americans own a home. Well, if you take that and you push into the commercial realm, it gets even less. And then, you understand why we don't have the political power that we have. You understand why we don't have the educational resources that we would like to have. We don't have a strong position in political footholds and as far as policy and its creation. All this, personally, to me, is, and even our health, is all tied to real estate. And the power of real estate is so strong. I want you to all to understand that it is so strong that at the inception of this country, and I do have to, I'm a little bit, I don't like using the word white when it refers to a race, because honestly, there's no such thing as white race. If you ask a person who is not a white ethnic if there's white race, they'll say no, there's just them. But that being stated, the inception of this country, it stated that it was not just white men that could vote, it was white men with property. And so that with property part is so important that it was in the inception of this country. And so we as a community have to do our best to try to obtain as much property, control the property as much as possible, because with control of property comes control of money, control of assets. You also then have a stake in that community and what is said as far as its taxes, its laws, its policies. You also then be able to create generational wealth and also increase your quality of life. So those are all the benefits and why you would want to invest in real estate. It's a little bit deeper than just receiving the cash flow. So that being said, what types of real estate are there? There is residential, which residential has certain parameters. So residential includes single family, means like, the ones that we're all familiar with, single family detached home. There's condos, and then there's townhomes, and then also multifamilies up to 4 units. So duplex, triplex, and fourplex, all considered residential single family homes. So it's also how, if you wanted to purchase a property, I would advise you to, because I had a question, if I'm starting out in real estate, how would be the best way for me to build up a real estate portfolio? If you can, I would encourage you to try to move forward with a duplex first, and I'll tell you more why a little bit later. But then there is commercial property. There's multifamily, which means 5 units and above. That is considered multifamily. If you do now, from a physical standpoint, 2 units and above is multifamily. But and this is where it gets a little tricky. Condos and townhomes are considered multifamily development, but they're not multifamily ownership. They only are owned by individuals. So just be clear on the clarity of how these terms are used. And that's one big thing that I will say. I'm glad I'm speaking to the audience that I am, because you guys are mostly well aware of how to navigate some of the preliminary foundational stuff. But what I want you to understand is when you start to get into real estate investment, it gets a little bit tricky. And in all real estate, no matter if you're dealing with, hey, I'm just trying to buy my first home, or I'm trying to buy a 20-unit apartment building, these principles still matter. There's 3 principles, there's 3 pillars to real estate. There is the physical structure, there's the property itself, there is the language and contracts that are associated with the transaction, and then there is finances. That is also something that is going to always be a part of a transaction. However, language and contracts is superior to the other two. Why? Because it controls the other two, which makes it supreme. So I want to be clear that the language that you are encountering when it comes to real estate and investing really matters on its specificity. You can't, similar doesn't really exist in the world of real estate. So I just want to be clear on that as I go through describing certain terms. The four main asset classes of commercial are multifamily, which we talked about there. So the three of them are physical structure, language of contracts, and finances. And so there are four asset classes for commercial are multifamily, which also can be known as mixed use, where mixed use means that it has multifamily and one of the other, more commonly two, office space or retail space. And that is usually on the first floor, and then the multifamily units are above it. Industrial is another one that's very common, and it's very hot right now due to how our buying patterns has shifted how warehouse is used. Because we do a lot of online activity, where all that is stored is in industrial type warehouse settings. So therefore they have become a lot more hot, and they are a lot of them are outdated compared to what our needs are today. So a lot of people are getting into remodeling or rehabbing those or repurposing them as well. And then that's another thing. I'm trying to cover a wide amount of interest. So please bear with me. I'll say this. Multifamily is hot. It's hotter than it's hotter than other. Multifamily and industrial compete for which one is the hottest sector right now. The vacancy rates is what's driving the value high for multifamily because of the fact that there is such a rental crunch on the market. Office is really doing not so great, especially when COVID kicked in. But do understand, and then not only that, just the way we work a lot more remotely, and just we are a lot more efficient. So expect office properties to be repurposed, more likely going to be turned into multifamily. And then you have retail. Retail took a hit prior to COVID, and then also during COVID, but it has a great resurgence as we have returned somewhat back to normal. So that is all beautiful things that come from that. But now, one of the things that I want you to think about as we're talking about these different kinds of asset classes, and do understand another asset class that could be considered commercial is land. And that's acres. We're talking about real big plots of land, not just a single lot type situation. Or you can actually get into huge lots and all that. But we'll get into that in a minute bit more. But you need to know what type of investor you want to be. Why do you want to invest? What experience do you have with investment property is a question that you need to know answer to. What type of purchases have you been familiar with in the past? What education have you been exposed to? How do you plan to fund this investment? How involved do you want to be? And do you want to be solo or in a partnership? Because solo is great. Yeah, everybody wants to be, I want to own all these properties. Yeah, but then all of that responsibility falls on your shoulders. It's not always that fun. So you want to be careful with how you approach. Not only do I own some individual, but I also own stuff in partnership as well. And when you talk about real estate investment, there's really three different ways that you can approach it. You have to look at, there's fix and flip, where you buy, you repair and do some repairs, and then you sell it. There's buy and hold, where you buy and you hold it and you're worried about the cash flow. And then there's a actual couple of stages that are for those that are a little bit more advanced, and that is wholesale and bird dogging. We'll talk about those in a second. But before we get into which one you got to do, you got to know what's in your portfolio. What do you have capacity to do? And you're like, okay, well, what does that mean? I mean, well, first off, you got to know where you're at before you can know where you want to go. So you have to know how much money do you have in the bank? How much can you put towards this? If you have a property, how much equity do you have in that property to work with? What is your credit situation? How can you improve your credit score? One big thing that I will tell you, again, I only have 1 hour to go, and so I can't go into everything in great detail, but I'll just tell you some big things that can matter. There was a situation where I had to do a refinance because I wanted to refinance the house that I was in so that I can secure a lower payment before I moved on to my next property. Reason I did that was because the interest rate at which I bought it at was higher than what the current interest rate were at that time. And not only that, I could also pay off my first and my second loan that I had, because I had a first loan that I bought. But over time, I had a second loan that I took out to do repairs and improvements on the property. And I knew that the property had grown in its value. And someone had asked about what was called forced appreciation. Forced appreciation applies to commercial, where you are either raising rents and or suppressing your expenses so that the overall value of the property, it's called a cap rate, grows. So for example, if you're collecting in a commercial level $10,000 in revenue a month, and you were able to kick up the rents to where you were able to get 11,000 a month now, and that is in cash flow, and your expenses were 3,000 a month, and you got that down to now $2,000 a month. That went from a spread of 7 to 9. So your value on what you make a month is greater, so therefore the property is worth more. But that also can occur in residential, and where basically what it is you improve a property, because the only way you're going to be able to raise rents is that you've done something to make it so that it's more valuable. I'm willing to pay more rent to be here. Well, that's the same with residential. You improve the property so that you can get a more higher appraisal value for it. Okay, so that's the expenses part doesn't play to the appraisal or the financing, but you can see how they're very correlated. So what I did was that I improved the property. I paid off the first and the second. I had also a little bit of money that I could take out, and I used that in order to purchase the second property. So that's what I'm saying. You need to understand how your approach to this is going to be. And again, I'm trying to answer some of these 50-some questions in my presentation here. So hopefully this is making sense to you as well. Yes, my credit was equally important for both sides, because your credit score, and do understand credit scores, you should be at a 640 or better just to even play. But that 640 is like the bare minimum. You can go south of 640, but it's going to cost you a lot, either in capital and or your interest rate that you're going to end up paying. The more desirable space is about 680, and then you get a little bit of a change in your, you may, let's say for interest rate, you may be at a 3.5 at 640. You might be at 3.25 at a 680. At a 720, you might be at a 3%. You see how it's going down because of the fact that my credit score goes up. So that's going to be for either refinancing and or for a purchase. So hopefully that answered your question. And when you are thinking about that, maybe it's better for you to partner with somebody and or work with someone who is considered a private lender. I'll hopefully be able to get into a little bit of the details on that moving forward. So let's talk about fixing and flipping. So you first have to purchase a property, and do understand that in purchasing a fixer upper is not as easy as you would like to think it is, especially if it has a lot of deferred maintenance and or is in a rough shape. FHA you can't do. Here's the thing, though, the property. Well, so the property that I'm talking about that I refinanced, I bought that under FA. Actually, I bought that under contract for deed because remember, I've been in real estate for over 20 some years. So I went through the horrible season. I went through a very bad, rough patch. I pretty much lost everything. So I had to rebuild from scratch. Well, in order to do so, I had to do a contract for deed to purchase the property after we had cleared out some of the mess. So I tell people, people say, it was a contract for deed a good thing? It depends on how you utilize it. And then there is, we refinanced out of contract for deed, because you always are going to have to refinance out of a contract for deed. You can't stay in a contract for deed. We refinanced using FHA money. Well, then I refinanced out of the FHA and to a conventional loan so that I can use FHA to purchase my next property. Because I wanted to keep my down payment low. That's a reason why you want to go rental first. We'll talk about that in a little bit of a second here. So understand, when you're buying a home, FHA doesn't mean that it has to be perfect. It just means that it can't be a serious fixer-upper. If you are planning on buying your first home and doing a serious fixer-upper, then you would want to go with a purchase rehab loan. That is different than a purchase loan. A purchase rehab loan will help you put money aside for the actual rehab, because in a purchase of a home with a traditional purchase loan, you don't get money to improve it, whereas a purchase rehab loan you would. Or so you would do that with either conventional. FHA does have a product that does that. It's called a 203K, and they have the threshold is 35,000. If it's lower than 35,000, it's one way. If it's over 35,000, it's done another way. So they do have that as a product. It's a little bit more difficult to qualify for, and it's a little bit more work. So you understand that all of that's going to matter. Yep. Okay. Let's see here. You know, right now, but in these series, what do you recommend? I would say that you would definitely. My advice: if you own the home already, and it needs renovations, serious renovations, don't try to pay that with your paycheck. Don't do that. It would make better sense for you to go ahead and take out a second, but you have to be very, very diligent with how you're going to use that money. You have to, when you buy something or when you're taking out money, you need to have your bids all the way in line. You have to have an idea what your scope of work is. You have to have your material costs well in advance before you even apply for the loan. Because if you apply for the loan and then you find out that your costs were not accurate, you can't really go back in most cases. It's too expensive to do so. So that's my advice for that. And then once you have the house improved, I would do as I did. You then refinance to take out the first and the second. It's, if you are going to do this, do it relatively quickly, because interest rates are still relatively attractive right now, but the future is unknown. We don't know where it's going to go. So, and that brings us to, actually, you need to know what your costs are. You need to know what, and that is, you do that through creating what is called a pro forma. You do a pro forma by outlining all the costs and the sources of that money to pay for those costs, and then you have an idea of what your overall objective is going to be and how you're going to do that. Now, there is a few things that you want to make sure you include in that pro forma. It is your hard cost acquisition, building materials, closing costs, your utility costs, your different trades, your electrical, HV, plumbing, carpentry, dumpsters, landscaping, staging, etc. All these are a part of your hard costs. Soft costs are like architectural, if you're getting into dealing with commercial property, engineering, financing, your fees associated with that, legal fees if you had that, marketing, real estate, inspection, services, and stuff of that nature. Those are all soft costs. And then also taxes, you want to be aware of how is that going to be treated and moving forward. Let's see here. So there's no way for me to check my time on this, but that's okay. We'll see.
Well, Nene, I'll give you a heads up when we're at 10 till, so you can start Q&A unless you want to start early.
Kurt, great. That would be perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. So that being said, buy and hold. Buy and hold, you need to understand first and foremost, how are you going to manage that property? That's the biggest thing. No matter if you're doing short term, such as Airbnb, and or long term, it's still going to be the same. Not same, but you need to have an answer for that question. How is it going to be turned over if it's going to be Airbnb? Who's going to do the laundry? Who's going to restock? Who's going to clean the place? Who's going to restock if you're going to have some, little trinkets or, I ain't gonna lie, when I went to an Airbnb, I like having a little, couple of waters in the refrigerator already. And it's a real nice situation, but who's going to do all that? And how are you going to manage it? So you need to think about that. And then is it going to be self-performed, or is it going to be through hiring someone? If you're going to hire someone, then you know that is a part of your soft costs. So keep that in mind. What is the maintenance? Is it maintenance required? If it's a freestanding property, that's one thing. But if it's a condo or a townhome, yeah, you don't have as much of maintenance because it's going to be in the HOA fees. So someone asked about what is going to be, average HOA fees. Right now, you're looking at two-ish to 2 to 3. It's still, if you can find something out there under $200 a month, great. But understand also what's included with that homeowners association fee. Is it, lawn care and snow removal? Does it include cable? Does it include amenities such as like a pool, tennis court, basketball court? What's included? Do you get a garage? Are they, because understand what the HOA fees, association fees cover. Everything outside the condo and or townhome. So, which means roof, siding, sidewalks, asphalt, anything of that nature. And if it's, so that's what all the fees will cover. You also want to review how much do they have in their bank. There's a whole other set of criteria that you want to look at if you're going to look at a condo or townhome. But the good thing about a condo or townhome, it does minimize your exterior maintenance. So you don't have to worry about the lawn. Because if you got a single family home, you have to work out who's going to maintain the lawn. If you're going to do it, you're going to come by once every week or 2 weeks, or you're going to hire somebody, or you're going to work it out so that the tenant does it as well. But either way, you got to have that conversation. And you have to figure out who's going to take care of immediate needs or immediate repairs. Are you going to have someone on retainer, such as a property management company? They will possibly have that as an outlet. Or are you going to hire someone that is like a service person, like a plumber or an electrician? So again, how do you plan on addressing that is your question here. And yes, no, replacing a roof is not cheap. Let's see here. So, and I'm trying to keep up with the chat. I think I'm doing pretty good. All right, so let's go ahead and continue because I want to make sure I get through a lot of this. All right. So, let's talk about obtaining a property. So, obtaining a property, you could do it either through purchase acquire, where you are buying it outright. and you are the final owner. So you are either going to improve it or you're going to maintain it and you're going to be the one that is moving that forward. There is another stage actually before that, and that is what is called wholesale. Well, what is wholesale? Wholesale is where you don't really want to do any of the final stuff. You don't want to manage the property. You don't want to do the construction on the property, but you found a really, 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 really good opportunity. Well, then what someone would do sometimes is that they will work on trying to get that under contract. Let's say you find a property that in the neighborhood, all around that neighborhood, it's at 300,000, and this property needs some work, but you're able to get it for 180,000. Well, some people would be like, hey, you know what? I'll put on 20,000 and sell it for 200 to somebody that's a rehabber. That's what we call the people who buy houses and fix them up. And they could put in 60 grand and then they could turn around and sell it for about 320. Do you see how you still were able to make a little bit of money? But in that situation, you would have to get in typically in the chain of command. Someone's asked, well, how much does one need to save to buy an investment property? There is going to be, that depends, honestly. It depends on how you approach it. If you're willing to buy a house, much less buy a duplex and live in one side, and you don't own any property right now, that is your cheapest way to get in. Because you can use a single family loan to buy a duplex and they would still have the same low down payment requirement. If you do FHA, remember, as I told you, I refied so I can get another house through FHA. And that is where okay, now do understand. I will do my best on keeping all the questions answered, but there again, I got a ton of them. So, long story short, it depends on the property. Actually, it's 25% if you are going to do investment the other way. Why is that important? Because so let's say you buy a single family home and you out the gate, yay! And then you're like, I want to go buy a duplex. Because they're going to be like, well, that's an investment property. It's 25% down off the rip. Whereas if you buy your duplex up front, you'll be asked to come with, there's 0 down programs out there. There's 3% down programs out there. There's 3.5% down or 5%. But either way, it's not 10 or 20%, where it's if you were buying it on your own. The 20% part for most people, just know where the 20%, why is that a number that is usually common in real estate, is because that's where the threshold for mortgage insurance starts. It's 20% or higher. As far as you having equity, you don't have to pay mortgage insurance. But if you are putting down less than 20%, then you will be more likely required to have mortgage insurance. Either the lender will pay it or you'll pay it, and it's still going to be a part of the transaction. So to get in, typically this is the way I did it, is that I used a single family loan, got in at a 3.5% down, made my improvements, had some family changes so I could legitimately say, oh, need a bigger house. And they were like, all right, well, that's going to be 25% down. Wait, no. The property that I'm leaving is my investment property, and the house that I'm buying will be my new primary. Oh, well, then that's again 3.5% down, 3% down. In our case, it was 3.5% down. So that's why it's an attractive position to go with an investment property up front as a duplex and then leapfrog into the next. You can even we went from one duplex to another duplex. It doesn't matter. It's just does have to, there's some parameters of which you have to make sure you hit. You can't go typically from a 2 and 2 to a 1 and 1. You can't go down. You have to go up. And do understand that there's a whole bunch of rules that I can get into about that, but we're not going to go into that right now. We're going to continue.
Nene, you've done a nice job of answering questions as we go. We are at question time. If you want to take a few more questions and then hop back in your presentation, we can do that. Looks like
Okay.
there's one for you. Can you talk about equity from an investment that you purchase larger multifamily property?
So that's where you, in the situation like right now, because of the fact that I live in this property, I am taking out, and I don't have a second. The property is improved as good as it's going to get. I'm not going to do anything like that. But I did refinance, and that was actually something. This understand this journey never stops. I bought this property that I'm currently in a year and a half, a little over a year and a half ago, and I already refinanced. You're like, wow, really? Why? Well, remember, I told you that I bought this second one with an FHA loan. I wanted to get away from the mortgage insurance. So I also did some things to it to make it well. The market appreciated. So, and the interest rate went down from when I purchased it. So the three things that I needed it to do happened in a short amount of time. I improved the property, the interest rate went down, and I also had a market appreciation. So we refinanced, got out of that, and then now I am applying for a home equity line of credit so that I can have that to purchase my next property. So hopefully you do that. Okay, I'm going to go through the rest of this because of the fact that I got to get through some stuff because I want to make sure I get to the bulk of this presentation. All right, so bird dogging is essentially where you don't have you're not in the chain of command, you just know about a great opportunity, but you can't actually do anything about it. Don't let that die. Find a real estate investor and either partner with them to obtain it and or give it to them and get money for a finder's fee. Don't just let that opportunity go away. For those of you that finds an opportunity, you have an old uncle that is selling a whole bunch of properties in Kansas City. Hey, we got some people on this line that would be more than willing to invest in that. I do also had someone that asked me, well, what about when you want to invest across state lines? How does that work? Well, first off, you got to know who you are. You got to understand how much money you're going to put into something, how much energy do you have to put in it. We should also understand how much is your expertise. What do you know about not only investing, but construction? What do you know about finance? What do you know about property management? These are things that you need to know. And how much time do you have to contribute to this? Because all that is very important. And then you need to know your characteristics about yourself of typically a successful investor. They are confident. They need to, you can't be, I don't know if I can do this, because I can tell you right now, this is not for the weak. You have to be decisive. You got to be able to make decisions. You have to be patient. This is not something that is going to happen overnight. There is there's a poll right now, so go ahead and take a chance to answer that poll, please. There is, you have to have a certain level of risk tolerance. You can't be scary on being able to potentially lose some money. Now, if you're smart about it and you do it methodically, you will be okay. But you have to be teachable and you have to be realistic. You can't expect to put in $10,000 and then expect that you're going to make $300,000 for it. It's not going to work that way. But all these are ideas that you need to know and hopefully exemplify. Now, the stereotypes is that of investors that they're all wealthy. No, they're not. They're all knowledgeable. No, they're not. And that they're all experienced. No, they're not. Or that they all have a construction background. No, all that is all helpful, but it's not something that is always required. You have kind of three different levels of an investor here. You have the novice investor who doesn't have a lot of time and also doesn't have a lot of money, little time to be involved. Then you should probably go on into making, do the bird dogging. You should try to find opportunities and then engage that person on how, hey, if I give you this opportunity, can you at least walk me from the beginning to end on how you got there, so that you can be able to learn vicariously through their actions and maybe, gain more confidence and gain more opportunity, stack your money that you create on the side, and then you can jump into the game. Maybe you're one of the individuals that is a private lender. What is a private lender? A private lender is a person that doesn't have a lot of time but has a lot of money to invest, and I don't really want to get it bogged down into the management and or the details of it. So they have fixed goals on more of the return of investment. That's something term that you should be aware of, is return on investment. May or may not have skills or experience. Has the most financial stability. Likely won't be involved in any of the construction. So here's what I'm saying: if you got a rich uncle, which a lot of us don't, but let's say that you know somebody, hey, coworker, somebody else, family member, friend, that's like, I want to get in real estate, but I really don't have the time. Where like, hey, I found an opportunity that is great. I know you don't want to do any other work. How about this? I'll do all the work, but you can get a percentage of what we get at the end. And a lot of people would be like, hey, if you're willing to do all the work and I get a good if I'm able to generate a good return on my investment, then hey, I'll be willing to do that. And then there's a full-time investor. That is where, they do it full-time, most risk reward. It's a gradual thing. It's not something that someone just jumps into. They have to usually have some good understanding on all of the components, from maintenance and management to construction to finance. It's a lot of different moving parts that you want to learn. You need to know your financial goals. Okay, you need to know, what are you trying to achieve? Do you want a profit in the future or an additional income in the present? Because you have to understand the fix and flip is kind of like a windfall. You get a big amount of chunk of money at one time, but then that's it. It's over, and then you got to restart and do that again. Whereas a buy and hold is residual income. It comes over time and then it will continue. And the only time it's over is when you sell the asset. So my feeling is that if you can pay down the asset and then also still collect income from it, now you're in the best world, because if there's no debt on it and you just simply have to pay property management fees, dude, that's a great windfall there. Yep.
Oh, I just want to give you a time check. We have about 2 minutes. I wanted to first thank you for attending. Lots of knowledge, great expertise, lots of questions, great job managing between your presentation and the Q&A. I did give you an opportunity to answer to any final thoughts for the group before you wrap up.
You know what? No, other than that, let me just say this. As you can see, timing is a big thing. This is not HGTV. This is actual real life. And so you have to make sure you're realistic with your performance and stuff. I do want to offer the group some investment planning resources. As you can see here, we got some investment books that are specifically for real estate investment. But then we also have some that are speaking to race and real estate. I think this group really needs to understand the history of real estate and our connection with it. And then last is also the team. Well, there's some other resources, websites to go to, and then podcasts and other resources. The last thing I want to mention is that you definitely want to establish a really good team. And that is going to be a team of accountants, loan officers, insurance people, general contractors, obviously your realtor, and a good inspector. So there, I'm done. If you have any questions, you can follow up with me. This is my contact information. This is my website and my email. I appreciate all of you for sitting through this hour with us. We always have some good programming. TC Band has been great in development of the Pan-African community and in its entirety, from professionalism to obviously your wealth. Please join us for the next event when we have one. And I'm sure if there's something about that, Eric will talk to you about that. But thank you, everyone, for showing up. And if you have any questions about real estate, as far as buying your own home, first-time home, investment, commercial, any of those things, please don't hesitate to reach out to me.
Great, thanks, Nene. We'll be in touch, and thanks everyone for joining. Have a good remainder of your day, and keep a lookout for our LinkedIn sites, our websites, and then an email with the link to the YouTube video. Thank you.